Hi there, this is Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to paint this really pretty dragonfly painting. And this dragonfly is over a pond with a lotus and a moon in the upper right hand corner. So I'm doing this on an 11 by 14 inch canvas with acrylics. The first thing I'm going to do is use my 3/4 inch flat wash brush and the colors Dioxazine Purple and Ultramarine Blue. I'm going to load my brush into the water and not really going to pat it dry. I'm just going to kind of tap it and load it with the colors. So I'm going to use these two colors, the blue and the purple, to apply to my canvas. And I'm going to be doing these sort of angular strokes with them. I'm going to be doing this to pretty much the entire canvas except for kind of the bottom area where the water is going to be. But I'm going to use my brush to apply the paint to the canvas, but I'll be using a blender brush to smooth these strokes out. So you can see that I'm applying these strokes in these sort of angular sort of directions just to get the paint on the canvas. But I'll be grabbing one of these blender brushes that I use often, and it's actually a makeup brush, and it's going to be used to sort of blend the strokes together so that you don't really see the strokes. But pretty much right now I'm just taking this 3/4 flat brush, getting that blue and purple onto the canvas. There's no really a reason why I'm doing blue in one area or purple in another area, but I am kind of watering it down so it's a bit thin. So you notice that I dipped my brush in the water there and kind of applied more of that purple on there just to kind of thin it out a bit. So you don't want your paint to be super thick in this area, and the water is going to help thin it out but keep it kind of wet because we'll be blending this here in just a little bit. But I don't want to mix the blue and the purple all the way. I want kind of a color variation in there. But I went down about 5 inches with that blue and purple combination, and I'm going to grab this brush. So this is that blender brush I was talking to you about. I use a makeup brush. It's like a foundation makeup brush, and I use that as a blender brush. And so I'm just going to take that and I'm going to blend the colors together to create this effect. So I'm just using the tip of the brush and kind of going in circular strokes, and it's going to allow that blue and the purple to sort of mesh together and sort of a galaxy effect. I think when I was designing this painting I was thinking galaxy background, but then it just kind of turned to this blue and purple meshed background. But it's kind of the same, a little bit of the same technique. So I'm going to go down to about where I have my hand here, so it's about 5 inches from the bottom of the canvas. But I'm going to just repeat what I did before. I'm going to go back with my flat brush and apply that purple and green, and then repeat the blending thing with my blender brush. Purple and blue, not purple and green. So I'm just taking the 3/4 flat and I'm doing short little angular strokes with those two colors, just grabbing one color, then grabbing the next. Bit of water in there if it seems too thick and it's not flowing very well. And then switch back to the blender brush, and that will allow you to get those colors to blend. So the reason why I'm doing it in segments is so that the paint doesn't dry, because the paint's drying super fast here. So I'm doing it in small segments, and then before the paint dries I can go in there and blend it really quick and just make sure that it's not showing like a gap from the top to the middle part. You want it to kind of all mesh together and be the same. So I'm just kind of blending it back up into the top part. And you don't want to over blend because unless you want to, but I like the variation of the purples and the blues in there, so it kind of keeps it unblended so it's not all the same color. And then you want to just go ahead and repeat that step again. So with your 3/4 flat, apply more color. You can go all the way down to the canvas. I actually went a little further down than I probably should have, but I wanted to kind of make sure I had all this filled up. But the bottom 5 inches is going to be water. So yeah, if you really wanted to go all the way down, you can, but I decided to leave about a 2 to 3 inch gap. And when I do the water in this next step, I won't be using the blender brush for the water part. I'll be using the 3/4 flat for the water part, and I'll be doing horizontal strokes here in just a second. But I'm just gonna get this all to kind of blend up in this sort of swirly technique of the background. So it makes a really pretty abstract looking background with the blues and the purples. I love this combination of the Dioxazine Purple with the Ultramarine Blue, a very pretty combination of colors. So the water is done with the same two colors, the Ultra and the Dioxazine Purple, but your strokes are just going in a different direction. So you want to kind of estimate about 4 to 5 inches. It doesn't have to be exact, it really doesn't. But that's going to be the water area where our lotus is going to be, and our little lily pad and some cattails. But it is about 4 inches from the bottom if you want to measure that. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. But we're just going to take the purple and the blue. So double load your brush with the 3/4 flat. You can add a bit of water in there for the flow. And you're just going to do left and right horizontal strokes on the bottom. And I'm going to go to about where my finger is. And you do not have to, you can do the best you can to get it to be horizontal, but it doesn't have to be perfect in that area. Just kind of estimate a horizontal line. So if you wanted to get a ruler and measure out the horizontal line, or use a T-square or even paint tape, you can. I just sort of estimated that. And just do left and right strokes all the way to the bottom until that whole area down there is filled up. And right here, I'm just smoothing out my strokes, making sure everything is nice and even. My strokes go all the way across the canvas. You can also, at this point, paint the sides of your canvas if you're working on a stretched canvas, so you can do the sides the same colors. When you're done with the whole background, I recommend rinsing off your two brushes, and we're going to go ahead, and before this dries, I'm going to use the splatter paint technique to splatter on some little bits of white paint. So I use this toothbrush for splatter paint stars a lot, and it's my special star toothbrush that I only use for splatter painting. And so what I like to do is dip it in a little bit of water first, and I take my finger and kind of apply the white paint with my finger, and that seems to give it a good consistency, although I highly recommend that you test this out before actually splattering on your canvas, because if it's too wet, you're going to get really disappointing watery splatters. If it's too thick, you're going to get also disappointing splatters. So you want to get the right consistency of water in there. And if it seems like you added too much water, you can wipe it off with a towel like I did a couple seconds ago. There's a little bit too much water on my brush. But then you just take it and you kind of flick it around the canvas, and you want the stars to kind of go everywhere. They would even reflect in the water to give it that kind of whimsical effect. And you can even do some different consistencies. You can add a little bit more white paint on there and have it show up in different areas of the canvas, have it be in different clusters. But that's it for the splattering. And so you want to go ahead and wait for the background to dry for the most part. We're going to be doing the moon next. So the upper right area of the canvas at least needs to be dry. You can get a blow dryer, kind of dry it real quick, or mine was dry enough to be able to go ahead and do this step. So what I'm doing is I have the color Cadmium Yellow Medium, and a little bit of titanium white. So I guess about equal amounts of white and yellow. And it's going to create it's going to make the yellow seem more opaque than it really is, and it's going to be able to stand out against this dark background. So with this sort of pale yellow color and a round brush, this is a number 8 round brush. You can do this with any brush, but I just grabbed the number 8 round brush. You're going to paint a circle in the upper right hand corner, and trust me, I get nervous with circles too, so just kind of relax and take your time with this. If you're really challenged by this circle, you could trace a circle on the canvas. You can find a circle around the house that's about that size and trace it with a piece of chalk and then paint it in. Or you can kind of just do the best you can to improvise the circle. So you're going to paint sort of a medium-sized circle for the moon. And I like to make sure my circle starts out small and then just gradually paint strokes going in a circular direction, gradually making my circle a little bit larger as I work around kind of the edges and making sure that it's all filled in solid. Then you're going to do the moon beams around the circle. So you're going to grab your towel and wipe your brush off with the towel. So now there's not a lot of paint on my brush. And then I can go in here and do these dry brush strokes. And they're called dry brush strokes because I dried my brush off. So since there's not a lot of paint on my brush, my strokes are going to be kind of feathery, light, translucent, and that's the effect that we want. We're creating the effect that they're moon beams or reflections from the moon, kind of reflecting on any of the clouds in the sky. And I'm just going to paint circular strokes with those dry strokes around the moon, and it creates that swirly moon effect. Then I'm going to add just a bit of white in there. And actually, I'm going to brighten my moon up a little bit with that teeny bit of white. You don't have to do this, but I wanted to kind of brighten that up a little bit. You can see it creates more of a glowing effect when you add just a teeny bit more white in there. You can kind of do short little textured strokes in the moon, but we're not going to add much detail to the moon here. I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush off and set it to the side. So now we really want our canvas to be nice and dry. We're going to be drawing the dragonfly next, and I'm going to be going off of this sort of reference graphic on the left that I printed out. And I'll be using a white charcoal pencil, or actually no, it's chalk. It's a white chalk pencil to do my drawing. And so our dragonfly is going to be going diagonal, like the reference is going. And I'm going to start with his head, and I'm going to start by drawing an oval for the head, and then a sort of a larger oval for the thorax of the dragonfly. And then we have his abdomen that is going at a diagonal as well. So I'm just going to lightly sketch sort of a curved diagonal, and it goes to a point. Then I'm going to draw the antennae and the eyes, so the two sort of oval shapes on each side of that head for the eyes. And I'm going to lightly sketch out the wings. So notice where the base of the wings are coming from. They're coming from the upper part of the dragonfly. So I guess that's the thorax, the upper part. And I'm going to sketch out sort of these curved diagonal lines, and each of the bases of the wings kind of go to a point, and this wing down here is a little bit different in shape. It kind of goes down and curves down a little bit flat towards the bottom of the wing. And then I'm going to kind of mirror, so there's some symmetry going on here with the wings. You want to make sure that the wings are relatively the same shape And then I'm going to do the bottom wing here. So I'm going to curve down, kind of estimate. I use my hands to kind of make sure that both sides of the wings are relatively the same size. And I'm going to sketch those out, make sure that they're the same length. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of go over my drawing and kind of sketch it, go back over it to make it a little bit darker so that it shows up better. So if the drawing is a little frustrating for you, I have a Traceable for you that you can download and use that to transfer to your canvas with white graphite paper or rubbing chalk on the back of the Traceable and tracing it. There's a couple ways you can do it. Next, we're going to jump in and start painting our dragonfly. So the dragonfly body is the cad yellow and the white, so the same two colors we used in the moon. And I'll be using my number 4 round brush for this step. So I'm going to start with the yellow and add maybe a teeny bit of white in there. Again, that white really helps the yellow to stand out against the darker background because yellow tends to be a see-through color, and adding a pop of white in there will make it show up a little bit better. And so I'm just going to take that and go ahead and paint it in solid. So that's the head of the dragonfly. And then we're going to paint the thorax of the dragonfly, and then the abdomen as well. So for the bottom part, so that bottom long piece that we drew, that's actually not just going to be painted in solid. I'm going to go in a different direction here. I'm going to take my brush and do curved strokes inside of that shape that I drew. And so you can kind of see what's happening. It's creating that different sort of style of stroke in there. So I'm just painting little curved strokes inside of that area, just with my brush, just creating that effect with my brush, little curved strokes, and I can kind of go back in there and kind of make it more rounded. And I'm going to go down all the way to his point, but when I get kind of in this smaller area here, I'm not going to do those rounded oval strokes there. I'm just going to go ahead and fill in that area. So I'm going to go in this direction now, go in a diagonal direction and fill the rest of the area in. Grabbing a little bit of pop of white, and I'm adding a little bit of white on one side. So I picked the left side. So that little teeny pop of white on the brush to the left side is going to create a little bit of depth in the dragonfly. We're not going to go in super realistic detail here, but it's nice to give our yellow a little bit of variation in color in there. And I'm just going to kind of fill that in with a second coat and make sure we got some good coverage here. I'm not allowing any of my purple from the sky showing through. Next, you want to go ahead and rinse that brush, dry it off. We're going to be doing a technique of painting the wings next. So this is one of my favorite parts of the painting because it's such a pretty effect. We're going to be doing dry brush style. So remember when we did the dry brush moonbeams, we're going to do that with the wings. So I'm going to load my brush with the white and a little bit of yellow. So a lot more white than yellow, kind of like the same color as the moonbeams. I'm going to wipe my brush off with the towel, and I'm going to do these really quick sort of strokes in there. So there's not a lot of paint on my brush. You really want it to be dry in this area. If it looks like it's coming out too thick, too opaque, too solid, you want to wipe that brush off again, because this is really, so dragonfly wings are translucent. We really want to kind of see through the the wings. So we want to see some purple background through our wing here. And even right here, it might have been too opaque for this. So that's the first wing. And then so for the second wing, you want to just make sure that you kind of do the same thing. Load your paint, only small amounts of paint. Hold your brush very lightly. So don't have a heavy hand for this step. So very light, loose strokes, quick strokes. It should be very light and feathery. It kind of goes in the direction of the wing. And we're not trying to completely cover all of that purple background. We really want it to kind of show through. And then go ahead and do the next wing. So have your rag or paper towel handy. Make sure you're wiping that brush off so that there's only a small amount of paint on your brush. And go ahead and fill in the next wing. So I kind of outlined the wing shape itself and then fill the rest of it in. So a little bit of paint, wipe it off with the towel. Outline the wing itself, but fill it in with that dry brush stroke style. So what I did right here was I wanted to see a pop of yellow in my wings. So I grabbed just the yellow on my brush and I went in there and added a few strokes of yellow, and it gives it a nice little variety of color to look at than just the white dry brush. A little pop of yellow. And so also we have the antenna. So I just did that with the white. You can do that with white and yellow or just white, so up to you. But we also have these things called motion lines. So if our dragonfly is moving its wings, we would see these motion lines. And to do the motion line effect, it's pretty much dry brush again. Very quick strokes in there. So I did it at the tops and the bottoms of each of the wings. So you want to go ahead and rinse that brush off and set it to the side. We'll be doing the fireflies, the lightning bugs next, and I used my finger for the most part with these little lightning bugs. So you want to make sure you have enough yellow on your palette, a little bit of white in there if you want white, and yellow if you want it to be a little bit more opaque. But I'm just going to take my finger and dip it in the yellow that I already have right here. So just a little bit, not a lot of paint. In fact, you probably want your towel ready to kind of just wipe it off. But you're just going to take your finger and you're going to press and sort of turn, and it's going to create these little glowing lights. So you just take your finger and press and sort of turn. They don't all have to be the same size. In fact, you can kind of vary some of the sizes. You can also vary the intensity of it, so you can have some that look more dull and some that look a little bit more brighter. Do as many circle prints as you want all over the background area. If you wanted to do some in the water, I suppose that would be okay. I didn't do any in the water because I wasn't sure the placement of my lotus and the lily pad yet, but we could always add more fireflies later. So the next step is to actually get a paintbrush this time and load it in just the white. So this is the number 4 round brush and titanium white. So you're just going to get your white and you're going to go ahead and paint a little small white circle in the center of each of your yellow dots that you made. And some of the little white dots that you paint can be brighter or larger. Some could be smaller, so you can kind of vary the size or intensity of it. But you can see the effect that it's creating. It's making it look like a little glowing lightning bug in the sky. Next, we're going to go ahead and rinse that brush off and set it to the side. I will be showing you how to draw the lotus flower next. So I'm using a white chalk pencil, and I'm going to start with the petal that is on the bottom, and it's sort of a teardrop shape right there in the middle. And then we have two teardrop shapes that kind of go on the left and the right. And the right one, you can kind of see it kind of dips down a little bit. And this one is also a teardrop shape behind the front ones, and it kind of dips down a little bit. And then we have two more shapes sort of in the back that go to a point. So I drew a total of 7 petals. The next thing I'm going to do is paint in the lotus flower, and I'm using the two colors Quinacridone Magenta and Titanium White. So I have both of those colors loaded onto my palette, and I'll be using that number 8 round brush again. So I'm going to mix sort of a medium shade of pink. If you're familiar with the color medium magenta, it's a Liquitex Basics color that I sometimes use. It's pretty much that same color, kind of a medium magenta color. So I'm going to take that medium magenta color and paint in my front petal with that color. So I'm just using that round brush and filling it in. You can add a little bit of water in there to kind of help with the flow of the petal, but you want to go ahead and fill it in all solid with that color. Then I'm going to grab a little bit of that Quinacridone Magenta on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to apply it to the left side of the petal, just giving it a little bit of, I guess, shading or value over here on the left side. So we're going to vary our color of this magenta with each of the petals so that they can stand out. So this one's got a little bit of dark shading on the left side. We can add a pop of white over on the right, but we're not going to make it super bright on the right. So just a little bit of white on the right side, blended in a bit. And then I'm going to jump to the very back petals. So the very back petals are darker. So I'm going to grab more Quinacridone Magenta on my brush so that those petals are filled in a darker color. And they definitely stand out from the front petal because they're darker. So I'm filling those two shapes in. And then this is optional, but you can add a little pop of white on the right side, and not too much. We don't want it to be the same intensity as the one in the front, but just a little pop. Give it a teeny bit of highlight over on the right side, blend it back into the colors. And then we're going to go ahead and paint our next row of petals. So you want to just kind of keep in mind that since this petal's right next to the other petals, you want to kind of be aware of the color. So this is lighter than the back petal. That's going to make it stand out a little bit. But better from the darker one. And so a little bit more Quinacridone Magenta on the right side and kind of get it to blend. So I'm just taking it and I'm sort of outlining the shape, but I'm filling it in. My strokes are going in the direction of the shape that it's being filled in. And then right here, we want to make sure that maybe this part right here that's touching that front petal, it's got to be darker in order for it to stand out. So I'm making sure that there's more of that magenta and not so much lighter pink in there so that it stands out. And then right here, this part's going to be lighter so it stands out from the one that it's touching. So a lighter shade of pink, I'm going to blend it down to a darker shade of pink. And again, my strokes are going in the direction of the petal. They're going in a curved direction. So the petals stand out from one another just by varying the amount of white or the amount of magenta that's applied in the area that you're filling it in. And then you want to kind of apply the same concept to the other petals. So just make sure that if the petal that it's touching is darker, you want to kind of do the opposite. So that petal behind this one is darker. So I'm applying lighter pink in that area. And then right here, I just want to kind of make sure it's a different tint of pink so it stands out from the front petal. And it's also going in a different direction as the front petal, so that also makes it stand out. And this one's kind of awkward because it's going off the canvas, so we don't really see the rest of it. I'm going to add a pop of darker in there just to kind of get that to stand out a bit. This one's going to be lighter at first, so it stands out from the rest of the petals. A whole bunch of white right there. That really made that piece pop. And just kind of blend it in with the darker pink in there. And we can go back in and just kind of add a second coat in there. Just don't get too crazy and overblend. Next, I'll be demonstrating the lily pad. So the lily pad was done with Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, but I lightened that green because it's such a dark green. It's not going to show up very well on the dark color. So we're going to take that green and get some white into it. So I have my number 4 round brush. I dipped it in a little bit of water at first, kind of pat it dry. So I'm going to take my green, add a little bit of white in there, so that'll lighten the green, but I also want to yellowify, I don't even know if that's a word. I want to add a little bit of yellow into the green to make it kind of a warmer green, I guess. So a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white in there, and so you have kind of a yellowish green for your lily pad. And then you're just going to take your number 4 round brush and kind of, with your paintbrush, sort of draw out the lily pad shape. So it's kind of floating on the water. So it's kind of a circular shape, and then it kind of goes inwards a bit. And you're just going to go ahead and fill that shape in solid. I'm not going to leave it super solid green, so I'm going to grab a pop of white in there, or maybe a pop of white and yellow, and add a few little curved strokes on that. Give it a little bit of a highlight and some color variation. Next, I'm going to demonstrate the cattails. So these little things that are sticking out of the water, I did that with this angle brush. So the angle brush is helpful for painting some thin lines and grass, and perfect for cattails. So I'll be using the angle brush with the little point pointed downwards. I'm going to load it with the same color that I used for the lily pad. I'm just going to take my brush and hold it so the chisel part is making the line, so the top point of the angle brush is facing towards the left, if that makes sense. And I'm just dragging, quickly dragging the stroke upwards, and the green's not really showing up here, so I'm going to add a pop of white here in just a little bit. But I'm just making a few grass blades sort of sticking out. There's not a lot of room to work with here because we have the wing of the dragonfly there. I suppose if you wanted to do more cattails on the left side of the painting, you can. I just chose to do them over here for some reason. So a little bit of white in there, you can see that instantly brightens your green up. But little short angular strokes in there, and you have the cattail base. So for the actual brown top part of the cattail, I did not I don't have brown for this tutorial. I mean, I have brown paint I can grab, but I didn't list brown as a color. So I'm going to show you how to make brown. If you don't want to make your own brown, that's okay. You can just grab brown paint, but I'm just going to do it real quick. So brown is made by mixing green and magenta and yellow. So about equal amounts. So grab a little bit of green, grab a little bit of magenta, grab a little bit of yellow. The green's pretty strong, so probably too much green in there. So probably not so much green. So a little bit of green, magenta, yellow, pop of white in there. That'll make it look like kind of a light brown. Again, green, magenta, yellow will make brown, a little bit of white. And using that number 4 round brush, and you're just painting these little ovals on top of your grass blades for the cattails. You can even add a little bit of highlight in there, a little pop of white line onto those. And I'm just going to apply a second coat on each of these cattail ovals. Go ahead and rinse your brush and dry, and I'm actually going to grab the angle brush again, and I'll be painting the water lines. So with the angle brush, I loaded it into the white, and I'm going to start with the horizontal lines because those are super easy. I'm just taking the angle brush and I'm painting short little horizontal lines all throughout. This is creating the illusion that there is reflection in the water. It's also going to make it look more like water in that area. And then you can paint around the base of your cattails. You can paint around the base of your lily pad. You could switch. So with these curved lines, I switched to a round brush because it's kind of hard to paint curved lines with the angle brush. So just with the round brush, kind of contouring strokes. It means the strokes are going in a curved direction around the shape. And I can even take this, so you didn't even have to use the angle brush if you don't like using the angle brush. If you prefer the round brush, that's okay. And just do little short reflection lines in the water. So for the last step, I will be demonstrating the details with a Sharpie. You could do this with a Sharpie, that's okay. It's probably easiest to do it with a black paint pen, but my black paint pen was all out of ink at this time of doing this painting. So I grabbed the Sharpie, but you can use a Sharpie or a paint pen, or even a really tiny round brush with Mars black paint would work okay for this step. But the reason why I'm grabbing the pen is because we have some super detailed areas. So I'm going to do his eyes first. So 2 little ovals for the eyes on both sides, and a little bit of dark outlining on the thorax and the abdomen, but I'm not really going to outline everything because then it's going to look too outlined. So just a few curved lines on the top part and a little bit on the bottom part, but I didn't go all the way down. And then for the wings, we have the vein texture on the wings. So I took my pen and I sort of outlined the bottom part of it first. So I just took that and kind of loosely outlined the bottom, but I didn't outline the entire wing. So you don't want to outline the entire wing. And then I'm holding my pen very lightly and I'm doing these sort of loose, staggered oval lines. And see how they're staggered, kind of like a staircase. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint some more sort of curved lines. Again, sort of staggered, uneven. They are going diagonally in the direction of the wing. Keep it simple. If you want, you can kind of look at images of dragonfly wings and kind of study the designs on the wings, but I didn't want to get too complicated here. And so I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to start by outlining the bottom part of the wing, and I'm just going to kind of loosely with my pen do the little oval sort of staggered lines very loosely with my pen. I'm not pressing too hard. I'm holding the pen very lightly. And then you want to repeat that for the other wings as well and kind of make it as symmetrical as possible, although it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. There's a couple last minute final details that I'm going to do with this painting, and that includes adding a little bit of light into the eye area, so a little few dots of white right on the eyes of the dragonfly, and then maybe a few pops of white on the wings. I know this part is kind of optional because it's based on preference of where you want to add your touch-ups to your paintings. I also went in there and added a few last minute lightning bugs because they're so much fun to paint. And now that you have everything down as far as composition goes, you can go in and add your little lightning bugs wherever you want. You can even add some over the water area if you want. This painting tutorial is coming to its conclusion. I hope that you enjoyed painting this dragonfly with me. I had lots of fun with it. I cannot wait to see your painting, so please share it with us. You can email it to me. If you're a part of one of our Facebook groups, you can share it in the Facebook group. But that's it. Thanks for watching.